This chapter explains the delegation of authority in organizations. After going through this chapter, you would be able to define and importance of delegation, describe the principles and forms of delegations, and identify the limitations and hindrance to delegation. All organizations are based on the principle of hierarchy, which binds different levels and units of the organization with a continuous chain of authority. In a scalar organization, all authority legally belongs usually to the head of the organization. However, if the organization has to work efficiently, authority has to be given to every employee to enable him to do his job. The problem faced by the head of the organization is therefore to make authority in necessary measures available to his subordinates without himself parting with it completely. This process of converting specified authority yet retaining the ultimate authority is known as delegation. The process by which a manager shares some of his work and authority with his subordinates is known as delegation of authority. One of the important features of an organization is that it involves group effort to achieve specified objectives. The organization consists of managers and non-managers headed by the chief executive. Each manager is given authority in accordance with his task and responsibilities. He is also required to get work done by his subordinates. According to Mooney, delegation means conferring of specified authority by a higher to lower authority. George R. Terry, according to him, delegation means conferring the authority from one executive or organization unit to another. Now let's look into the elements of delegation. Delegation takes place when a manager passes on to his subordinates some of his tasks or functions, together with the necessary authority to perform the task or functions. The manager who so delegates also holds his subordinate answerable for due performance of the assigned task. Thus, the process of delegation involves the assignment of tasks or functions, entrusting of authority and imposition of accountability by a manager with respect to his subordinates. It is a process of sharing of task and authority between a manager and his subordinates. The subordinates to whom authority is delegated by their manager are empowered to decide and act on his behalf in respect of certain tasks assigned to them. Delegation of authority has thus three interrelated elements. First, assignment of tasks and duties. In the process of delegation, every superior has to define the jobs to be performed by his subordinates. He must also define the results expected. He has further to decide on the allocation of duties to the subordinates. Secondly, grant of authority. Grant of authority implies giving the right to subordinates to decide and act, to use necessary resources and represent the superior. Managers at all levels derive authority granted by the superiors. In turn, each manager confers a part of his authority on his subordinates. Thirdly, creation of responsibility and accountability. Along with the task to be performed and grant of authority, the subordinates are tasked with the responsibility or obligation to carry out the duties assigned. They are also to give an account of the result achieved in terms of the standards of performance laid down. The subordinate's responsibility to the supervisor is absolute. It cannot be delegated or shifted. Due to this responsibility, the subordinate is accountable or answerable for the performance of his tasks and duties. Authority is delegated, responsibility is created, and accountability is imposed. Responsibility and accountability flow upwards. Responsibility arises out of authority, while accountability arises out of responsibility. Delegation, being a process of devolution of authority, has the following characteristics. First, delegation is the authorization to a subordinate or another organizational unit to act in a certain way independently. The delegatee has to act within the limits prescribed by the delegator. Within the limits, the delegatee, that is the subordinate, is not free to act arbitrarily but subject to the policy, rules and regulations framed by the delegating authority. Second, delegation has a dual character. A superior or delegator delegates the authority to the subordinate but at the same time retains the authority. It has been rightly observed that it is something like imparting knowledge you share with others who then possess the knowledge but you still retain the knowledge too. Thirdly, delegation implies partial delegation of authority. The delegator does not delegate his entire authority to his subordinates, for in case he delegates all his authority, he cannot exercise the power to supervise and control. Therefore, delegation is subject to specific or limited terms. Fourth, authority once delegated is subject to variance. It can be enhanced, reduced or withdrawn. It all depends upon the requirement of the time and accomplishment of the task. Importance of delegation. Delegation of authority is a very important part of the organizing function. It is by means of delegation of authority that the organization functions. The importance of delegation of authority may be outlined as follows. First, it reduces workload of managers. Delegation of authority permits a manager to share his workload with his subordinates. By passing on some of his own work to the subordinates, the manager is able to concentrate on more important aspects of his work. Since delegation of authority takes place at all levels of the organization, it facilitates proper division of managerial work and its assignment to all managers in a systematic manner. The primary effect of delegation is decongestion of work. Second, basis of superior-subordinate relations. Delegation of authority is the process by which superior-subordinate relations among managers are established. The flow of authority from the top management to lower levels is directed and regulated by the process of delegation. It gives meaning and content to the flow of authority and to the managerial jobs. Third, improves managerial effectiveness. The manager who delegates authority can perform much more than the one who does not. This is because the manager who delegates can get some work done by his subordinates and is able to concentrate on important matters which need his attention, take appropriate decisions and act accordingly. The manager increases his own effectiveness and that of his work unit by enlisting the cooperation and skills of his subordinates. Fourth, motivates subordinates. Delegation of authority implies grant of authority to the subordinates along with responsibility. As a result, subordinates have a sense of importance apart from getting some independence. They are motivated to work for higher performance. They are also likely to utilize their abilities and skills to do their job well. Fifth, develops managers. Delegation of authority is a source of development of managers. It opens up opportunities for managers to acquire leadership and other skills and competence. They are required to exercise their authority to handle situations and to solve managerial problems. They are also required to get things done by their subordinates by motivating and guiding them. Through the experience and competence acquired, managers are prepared for taking up higher responsibilities in course of time. Sixth, facilitates organizational growth. Delegation of authority at all levels of management facilitates the growth of the organization. This is because of division of labor implication. Delegation enables the organization to create more managerial jobs for assuming additional workload of expansion and growth. First, there should be no ambiguity about the authority that has been delegated. Policies, regulations and procedures should be well defined as to give no misunderstanding to the subordinates using discretionary powers. Second, the delegator must know exactly how much authority has been delegated. The orders of delegation should be issued in written form so that the person to whom powers have been delegated should be clear about the limits of delegation. Thirdly, the authority is delegated to get certain result by performing particular activities. The delegatee should be given the authority to use his discretionary, and the delegator should not expect him to act according to his own wishes. Fourthly, authority and responsibility should be co-equal. Authority entrusts a subordinate the right of taking and enforcing decision to achieve the assigned activity, while responsibility places the obligation upon him to perform these activities by using this authority. Authority without responsibility lack an ultimate purpose, and likewise responsibility without authority to carry or assign activities has a hollow ring. Fifthly, total responsibility of the superior. As total responsibility cannot be delegated, the superior cannot avoid his responsibility for the overall activities assigned to him merely by delegating his authority to his subordinates. Delegation is based on the principle of unity of command. This implies that a subordinate should be responsible to a single superior and should get the authority from him, keeping the communication open. These words emphasize that even after getting the delegation assignment, the administrator should always be ready to guide the subordinate. He should not grumble when a subordinate commits a mistake in connection with the delegated job, but should rather come to his rescue by providing necessary help and guidance. Eighthly, delegation should be succeeded by appraisal. When a delegated assignment is completed, it should be followed by an appraisal of the subordinates' performance. As authority is pushed downwards, top management must exercise a restraining hand so as to be sure that the interests of the program are not jeopardized by conflicting policies. Ninth, delegation should be properly planned and be systematic. Authority and responsibility for each position in the management of an organization should be spelled out, and delegation should be made to a position rather than an individual. Now let's look into the forms of delegation. A brief explanation of the different forms of delegation is firstly permanent or temporary. Now let's look what is the difference between a permanent and temporary delegation. In case of permanent delegation, the powers are delegated forever, subject to normal conditions, only in extraordinary circumstances. This kind of delegation might be revoked. Temporary delegation implies a delegation of powers for a short period of the accomplishment of some end. When the end is achieved, the delegation also ends. Now let's see what is the difference between a full or partial delegation. Delegation is full when no conditions are attached to the delegation and the person whom powers are delegated has the full authority to decide and take action. It is partial when the decision taken by him is to be approved by the delegating authority. Now, what is the difference between conditional and unconditional delegation? Delegation can be conditional and unconditional. Delegation is conditional when some conditions are imposed on the person on whom the delegation is conferred. It is unconditional when the subordinate is free to act without any reservation. Delegation may be formal or informal. Delegation is formal when it is embodied in some written rule, by law or order or note. Much of the delegation of the work found in the department and other organization is informal. It is based on custom or understanding by all concerned. It is not formally recorded. The next one is downward, upward, outward and lateral. According to the direction in which a delegation takes place, a distinction may be made between delegation downward, upward, outward and lateral. Delegation downward is by a superior to a subordinate, and this is the most frequent form of delegation. Delegation upward occurs when the delegator delegates authority over himself to a representative. Delegation outward means delegation to some outside organization, not subject to the direct control of the delegator. Delegation may be direct or immediate or indirect or mediate. In direct or immediate delegation, no third person or intermediate link intervenes between the two parties to delegation. It is a usual form of delegation. In case of indirect or mediate delegation, delegation is made through some third person or intermediate link. The manager should delegate as much as his subordinates can reasonably be expected to do. Delegation thus requires knowledge of people and of situations and has to be continuously revised to meet changes in personnel program or pressure. It is often forgotten that there are limits to delegation of authority as follows. First, the extent to which authority may be delegated is restricted by constitution, laws and political institutions. Second, the caliber of staff at the lower level. Delegation to an incompetent individual is clearly impracticable. However, the excuse of staff incompetence as a reason for not making delegation sometimes reflects upon the administrator rather than upon the staff. Thirdly, the extent to which special program requirements necessitates centralization. There may be situations where even the routine work decision may not be delegated. Fourthly, the extent to which work is of a stable and repetitive type delegation is made easier when guidelines can be established for lower levels to take action directly. The conditions of work are changed frequently. Delegation may be more difficult. Fifthly, the size of organization and its geographical location. The larger the organization and the broader its geographical coverage, the greater are the chances for delegating authority. Sixth, the method of internal communication in the organization delegation become difficult if there is a lack of effective procedural system in internal communication and work controls. Seventh, the degree of coordination which is required throughout the organization. A manager must coordinate or fail. MP Sharma has identified the following as powers which are usually not delegated. They are the supervision of the work of the first line or intermediate subordinate. Second one, general financial supervision and the power to sanction expenditure above a specified amount. Thirdly, power to sanction new policies and plans and departures from established policy or precedent. Fourthly, rule making power where it is vested in the delegating officer. Fifth, making of the specified higher appointments. Sixth, hearing of appeals from the decisions of at least the immediate subordinate. The retention of these powers in the hands of the chief is essential for the exercise of effective control by him over the working of the organization. Now, let us look into the hindrance to delegation. No doubt, delegation is of great significance for an organization. Still, it is often seen that the superior officers hesitate to delegate authority. In fact, there are several hindrances of delegation which can be grouped as: first one, organizational hindrance; second one, personal hindrance. The first one is organizational hindrance, that is, the lack of established methods and procedures for making delegation a success. It is essential that definite procedure for delegating the authority should be laid down. Delegation becomes easier if the procedure and the rules are well established. Second, lack of coordination and communication. Coordination is the cardinal principle of organization. Without coordination, no organization can work. But coordination requires close communication between the different units of an organization. Without communication, there cannot be any delegation and coordination. Third, unstable and non-repetitive nature of work. Stability is must for delegation. Stable and repetitive work affords a greater degree of delegation. Fourth, size and location of an organization. Size and location of the unit of an organization sometimes hinder the delegation of authority. The larger the organization and broader its geographic coverage, the greater are the chances for delegation. Fifth, lack of proper spelled out position and unspecified terms of delegation of duties and authority cause confusion and adversary, affects the delegation of authority. Now, let us look into what is personal hindrance we face in delegation. Personal factors too stand in the way of delegation. First one, person who rise to position of hierarchical leadership have more than normal egoism. Second, they are afraid that others will not make the proper decision or carry them out in the desirable manner. Third, they fear that disloyal or subversive powers will develop among strong subordinates. Fourth, strong, vigorous and higher motivated person become impatient with the slower pace and indecisiveness of subordinate. Fifth, in public administration, political consideration often make delegation difficult. 6. The cultural heritage of man has been one of the authoritarian leadership. Thus, the practice of delegation is partially dependent on cultural change. 7. The act of delegation requires an emotional maturity which is rare, even among successful persons. 8. The symbol of leadership, those personal qualities and traits which attracts the attention of others, are inconsistent with the philosophy of delegation. Those striving to succeed must make themselves prominent. 9th. Persons who desire to delegate do not know how to do it. 10th. They do not know how far they should delegate, at least for two reasons, that is, the science of organization and management is immature, and second, their work experience has not taught them to neglect, because most organizations fail to practice delegation. No doubt, the above mentioned hindrances stand in the way of delegation, but the significance of delegation in an organization setup cannot be denied. No organization can work without delegation and devolution. As delegation is a must, the only way to meet these challenges is to remove the bottlenecks as far as possible to make the delegation effective. First, select subordinates capable of shouldering responsibility. Second, define such responsibility. Third, train them to carry it. Fourth, establish general policies and disseminate them throughout the organization. Fifth, strive towards maximum standardization of both functional and housekeeping procedures. Sixth, carry on perpetual management planning consisting of job analysis, organization study, budget planning, workflow study, and simplification of system and procedure. Seventh, establish external checks which automatically show danger signals. Eighth, assure the flow of information up, down, and across the hierarchy. Delegation is an essential precondition for the growth of an organization. It helps in division of work, reduction of complexity, flexibility in organizational working, and raising the morale of the employee. The behavioralists have hailed delegation as the most forward-thinking principle, as it opens a new chapter in superior-subordinate relationships. Delegation of authority is a very important part of the organizing function.